just a matter of what data was given to these so-called journalists before us now.
Ranking Member Plaskett, I'm not a so-called journalist. I've won the National Magazine Award, the I.F. Stone Award for Independent Journalism, and I've written 10 books, including 4 New York Times bestsellers.
Mr. Schellenbeck, do you believe that the Russians engaged in a hack and release campaign with respect to the damaging information they released regarding the Clinton campaign?
To the best of my awareness, that is what happened.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
That's not the same thing.
The reason
influence.
I understand.
Also, that material was true. That is not a legitimate predicate for censorship.
You have made money that you did not have before, correct?
But I've also spent money that I didn't have before. I just hired a whole group of people to
patently obvious answer, reclaiming my time. Attention is a powerful drug. Eyeballs, money, prominence, attention, all of it points to problems with accuracy and credibility.
The people who pressed on with that American creed, yes, we can.
Yes, together, we will make America better.
Welcome, everybody. Next episode, Unintelligent Intellectuals. We already started talking, so yeah, we're just diving in. But yeah, no, my kid, he's like, oh, so and so's mom is sexist, and I was like, wait, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, well,
is this somebody that you know?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, oh, they yeah, because they said that they're treating me differently because I'm a boy, and I just like, I almost stopped the car. I was like, listen, like, I was like, that's not sexist. We just got to this long conversation. I was just like, listen, like, she's being prejudiced. Like the same way I'm prejudiced when it comes to you. Like, I'll treat you differently than I treat other kids because you're my kid. So I care about you more than I care about other kids.
Is that prejudice?
Yeah, because like
Well, the technical definition is prejudice, but it's not.
So it's like
I wouldn't really determine it that it is.
Yeah. But it's like technically, I'm there's certain things that I'll do with my kid that I don't do with other people's kids.
Because it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, so I'm prejudiced due to it not being my responsibility. So the same way, I said that, well, she might be treating him differently because he's a boy, because she believes that boys have to act this way, and this is the way that she knows to raise him in that way. I was like, that doesn't make her sexist. Sexist means
it means she's a bigot because she assumed gender.
Yeah. How dare she assumes her child's gender? I mean, she should have consulted the school before making that assertion. I don't think his mom thinks that she's superior to him because he has a dick. I think she's just raising him differently because he's a boy. I was like, it might not.
He's only saying that because those are words that he's hearing.
Yeah,
that's an example of what we've talked about, of how like the kids aren't ready to process stuff like that.
Yeah, that's why you don't.
So the more you like expose them at this like early age, especially if it's not in some type of very simple like way.
Yeah.
You're gonna get shit like that where they don't even know like what they're saying.
Yeah. For that, I was we're talking about his younger brother, and his younger brother likes watching shows that are like geared towards girls. And it's like, it's cool because like it's not, I'd rather him watch that than like the stupid shit on TV. But it's like, it's definitely something that's geared towards girls. Doesn't mean guys can't watch it, boys can't watch it. It's just geared towards girls. Mm-hmm. And so like I had said that, and I was talking to my wife, and then the oldest one was like, what? You can't say that, that's wrong. And I was like, what did I say is wrong? Like, this is, like, it was card captors, like very, you know what? Nope, I'm just gonna show you.
Is this like an anime?
Yeah, it's an anime. I was like, oh, this is geared for girls. I was like, I know it's geared for girls because this is, like, I watched this when I was...
Shadowwood, sword, thunder, power, sleep, card, captors of the cloud, expect the unexpected now.
The secrets of the cloud were all a mystery. But when this mighty book was opened, the powers were set free. Card captors, a mystic adventure. Card captors, a quest for all time. Each card possesses a power all its own. We've got to find them to bring the power home.
Shadowwood, sword, power, sleep, card, captors of the cloud, expect the unexpected now.
Card captors, a mystic adventure. Card captors, a quest for all time. Card captors. Card captors.
glad he watches it. I'm just saying this is shows that's made for girls. He's like, no, that's wrong. It's like saying that girls can't play in the NBA. And I was like, they can't. They're not allowed to play in the NBA. And he's like, but I don't think that's fair. And I was like, why is it not fair? And then we went into this whole thing. I was like, no, but you can't, like, the rule that girls can't play in the NBA is because of fairness. Because athletically, and now I'm over here, like, explaining things that he's not ready to, just because he hasn't been primed for it. Like, he doesn't understand the dynamics of, like, girls operating athletically at a different level than boys, but now I have to backtrack and have this whole conversation because of something that
It's stupid.
yeah. And just recently there was a school who refused to play against another team because the other team had a transgender athlete on the team, and they said that they didn't feel, and I think it was a religious school that said this, but they said, we don't feel comfortable playing against a team because it of the possible safety risks that it has for our inmates, and that we don't think is fair. And I think they banned the team. I think it's getting better. I think everybody's like noticing how ridiculous it is.
It's
And
gonna
but
get
it's
worse.
like, yeah. I could see
it's
that.
not gonna get better.
I could see it getting worse, but I'm hoping that like it gets worse before it gets better. And I'm seeing a lot of people just like buck against
this stuff is going to get worse. But when you mean it's getting better, there are more, like, no one's changing sides.
Yeah.
That's what you mean.
Well, I mean,
the more
like,
people that are being aware of this are like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah. I think that's the common response, but it's being showcased like it's this side versus this side, and it's a political down the middle divide. It's like no. Most people on all sides are looking at this and going like, what the fuck?
It's a whole different thing because.
Well, like I don't like the trans.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Fair enough.
Because it's just. It's the most team point of view in politics.
But it's so strange because it's like they play things like that, but like if you go like talk,
because it used to be abortion was the team.
Yeah, that's a big
If you're a Democrat, you're pro-choice.
Right.
But even then, it's just a natural progression that most people that are pro-choice have at least somewhat of an actual opinion on it.
Yeah.
Like, women should be able to do what they want, and then they just kind of, even though it's lazy, it's at least an opinion.
Yeah.
Whereas the gender stuff, it's literally blind allegiance. Because I've talked to people about this type of stuff, and like they have no idea what's going on, what's happening, what to even make of it, but they will literally say things like, well, not literally, because now I can't remember what or essentially are saying things like, you got to be accepting. Like, so it's like this blind acceptance of it. So it's
I've heard,
very weird.
I've heard people say that too, but like when I talk to like people who are transgender or like who are like touching that world, they're just like, I don't give a fuck about sports. like we don't being able to play a sport when you're like in
most
grade
people
school,
in those
that's
groups,
such a niche.
Most people in those groups don't even have the opinions that you hear people talking about that they have.
Yeah.
Like if you showed somebody a video of like somebody with his dick about to pop out of his G-string, gyrating and twerking in front of a 5-year-old, they'd be like, "What the fuck is like?"
Yeah.
They wouldn't be like, "Yes, this is beautiful.
Right.
Fuck the child now.
Right.
Shove that child should be sucking his asshole out."
Yeah.
No, they would look at it and go like everybody else would be like, "Why the?" And they wouldn't be like, "Well, why are people that?" They'd be like, why would a drag queen be around babies?
Yeah.
Like, and then everyone's kind of like, and then like you'll talk to somebody who's like done drag queen. It's like, what? Babies? Why would you want to do that? It's like, I'd drag like
Adult
at like 1 a.m. at a bar.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Who's
Not
bringing a baby?
not 12 o'clock in the afternoon, shoving my cock in a 5-year-old's face.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I feel like the way that is portrayed is like they make it look like, oh,
'cause it's-
this side
no,
versus that side.
No, but it's blind acceptance.
Yeah, and I think that blind acceptance is like being framed by mainstream
because-
media, like as opposed to like if you go out in the world
it's
with
not,
real people.
It's not mainstream media.
You don't think so? I think
It's the powers that be, dude.
yeah, but I think the powers that be like incorporate mainstream
It's the
media.
no, it's the people that are in charge of the world. It's the
Yeah,
people that run the organizations that help those people are the ones who are pushing this.
I would say the people run mainstream media. Like I think
No, I mean
maybe
like the person who runs like a non-profit group
Yeah,
thinks that way.
yeah, but like a lot.
They have a black fist that is really just the Communist Worker Party's fist.
Yeah, but at the same time, like people who like really care, I'm sure like there's a lot of nonprofit groups.
It's
and
anti,
I don't really know.
white supremacy. It's Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
They
that
all
kind of
have like they all have to have the same viewpoint,
Yeah, but I think
and then they
that
indoctrinate everybody else, and then they indoctrinate everybody that's in college.
yeah, but I'm not refuting that. I'm saying that like there's like the nonprofit groups that are like really trying to make a difference, not the ones that are like standing on like ideals.
What I'm
and-
saying is
and-
mainstream media didn't start this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This isn't
okay.
a mainstream
Originally,
viewpoint
yeah.
or like thing that they want us to do. This is just like there's been institutions set up where this is how you have to feel and think, and then in order to avoid any type of backlash
Yeah.
or you know what I mean, like Twitter or whatever, or someone getting canceled, then that in turn grows this element where everybody then just starts perpetuating and pushing this singular mindset where no one can branch off from it.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
No, yeah, you're right, and I would say that.
The minority is holding the majority.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's what I'm really trying to say. I'm trying to say that it's not the group isn't as big. The group that's advocating for that and that's pushing that kind of message isn't as big as they are being portrayed to be. Like I think the people who are like really care about people who really care about pushing the needle forward for transgender rights and stuff like that, or and like standard of living, are more concerned with how to interact in a nightclub, like when to reveal this and in order to not get murdered. Like I think they're more worried about
you
that
mean
than
coming
they are.
out.
Yeah. Or like just like if you go out on like especially transgender, like going out on a date and then it's like at what point do you reveal, hey, actually, haha, surprise, in order to wait in the safest way possible, or like where is it safe? Like that would be something that I would understand, like necessitate a safe space. Where could you go in order to be comfortable being who you are and not have to worry about that kind of thing and the person snapping and going off on you? Like that kind of stuff. I think that's what the majority of people are, especially majority of people in those spaces.
You just need to bring back shaming and bullying.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to shame.
Increase the suicide rates.
Dude, who knew that prescription would be so helpful for society? Well, yeah.
Did you see that? There was I think it was in Florida. There was the hearing where people were giving testimonies.
No, about what?
I don't know.
In
I
Florida.
hate that you don't pay attention.
There's like it's so like I'll do specific research on specific things, and like I'll
That's
have
the
a general.
thing. Like you have fucked yourself with algorithms.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I was like, no, I'm looking out and I'm looking for this stuff, but I just
Yeah, like my algorithms will be like, there's a Florida bill being proposed. The local legislator, or not the local, but the state legislators or legislatives, or whatever the hell they're called.
Yeah.
They're opening. They have an open forum for listening to people who are opposed to this.
Yeah.
And then I get that, and then you completely miss that, because then that becomes a news cycle, because for like the next 2 days, not only on like the mainstream platforms, but like Twitter or Instagram, and all these, clips are being circulated around, and then I know you're listening to
like I'll hear like
Thomas Sowell.
Yeah, because like you would be like when you said, "Oh yeah, you see what happened to Matt Taibbi," and I was like, no. And you're like, don't you know who Matt Taibbi is? I was like, yeah, he's doing the Twitter file thing. Yeah. Like on my thing, like when I came across him, I was like, oh yeah, he released this stuff on Twitter file, and it revealed this. I'm like, no surprise there. Next, and then so you're like, hey, did you see that? I'm like, yeah, I'm not surprised that the rich and powerful are colluding with government. Like it just.
And then I was like, no, it's something different.
Yeah. Then I started diving deep, or like when you told me about it, I was like, oh shit, and I was like, because
did you see the Senate hearing?
Yeah. Okay. Like I just don't after you pointed it out, I didn't see it beforehand, and like that stuff doesn't pop up because it's like when I would sit there and listen to it, and I'm like, I didn't gain anything from that experience. Like I've completely wasted my time. Like it's just like this is like I fucking hate it.
You dived into something that you didn't learn it.
Yeah, like I was like, what the fuck was that? Like that was so fucking stupid. Like, hey, I did some investigations. This is what I came up with. Like instead of like they could have been like,
you mean the Senate hearing itself?
Yeah, like I understand like what the stuff that he yielded through his research makes the Democrats look good. I mean, make the Democrats look bad, and the Republicans look good.
A way to try and discredit him and shame him.
Right, but like I would have just I want a substantive debate, like a conversation. Like they could have been like, hey, how did you get this stuff? Like, oh, this stuff yielded. Oh, that's unfortunate. That sucks. That's terrible. It makes us look like this.
They don't want to do that.
I know, but that's what that's what my algorithm's looking for. I'm looking for shit like that.
Like they just passed some law. I have no idea about what. The Supreme Court passed something.
Oh.
And everybody voted for it except for the new Biden lady.
Oh.
And she had some 4-page
like a reason why she
affidavit on like how problematic it is. And I was like, okay.
Me, like I like listening. I like reading those kind of things. Like the Supreme Court's like, okay, this is why I voted this way. This is why I voted that way. I was like, oh, there's so much information there. It's like to talk about the nuances and the rationale behind why people look at things different ways.
She's not going to be good.
I mean, I don't think I haven't seen anything on SCOTUS that like really like, oh man, I really wonder what their ideas are, how they're going to vote on this, or like I didn't care. Like there's nothing in there that I was just like, oh, I'm going to learn a lot from this, or there's stuff that I could take out of this that I think could.
What do you mean?
Like there's like when
how they think.
Yeah, or like just
shit. So,
well, because
I only care about how they vote.
Like I mean, there's a lot of people. I'm sure like a lot of people didn't like Scalia because they're just like, oh, conservative. But if you like. Even if you disagree with him, if you look at the stuff that he wrote, like the things that he agrees with, disagrees with, even if it's against...
don't talk about things that nobody cares about.
Yeah, I get that's my problem. My problem is that my algorithm is geared towards things that no one cares about. I'm like, oh, I'm really curious in this. But it's like, it's so informative.
And what you're talking about is a individual personal interest.
Well, it's an individual... like
curiosity.
I read something that he wrote about a decision that he made that was against he was the dissenter. Like the Supreme Court went one way and he was dissenter on one of these votes. I don't remember what it was, but what he said, and he was like, was against what the founders and something with the factionalism, like which was against what they were talking about in those documents that were defending the Constitution back during its founding. That they thought that Hamilton was a big part of, and some other writers. So then that made me jump into those the Federalist Papers, and then I started diving into that, and I was like, oh shit, this is really, really like. It made me. I think it made me a better person. Like, okay, now I understand this perspective a lot more. Now I understand
Well, you're
these
talking
writings
like
a lot
inside
more.
baseball stuff.
Yeah, but
which don't have a greater interest.
Yeah, no, but I think it should, because it's fundamental to what everybody else is talking about. And then, like, if you want to understand why people look at things different ways, it's like, I think it's
well, you could still understand wrestling and not have to know what getting some color means.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, you can.
Do you have any idea?
I have no idea what that means. Yeah.
Getting some color would be cutting yourself for blood.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like, I know that phrase because I have watched back in the day. I would watch interviews and where they talk about the inner workings of how wrestling is, and they're using the terms that they would use amongst each other.
Right. And
so you don't need to enjoy or understand the purpose of what blood is in a wrestling match to know. Getting some color.
Very true. You're right. But most people,
or giving some color, whatever it would be.
But most people, when they sit down and they have an opinion or a strong opinion about something related to politics, it's not because they're sitting there for entertainment purposes. It's not wrestling. It's because they fundamentally feel like we should go this way instead of that way, or that way instead of this way. And I think in order to dive down into okay, well, how do we know which way to go?
I'm just saying maybe the chief justices might not be the best ones.
Well, I'm saying the chief justices are...
They're usually pretty boring with how they're...
Well, I guess it depends. It's not like, wow, exciting writing. Like, this is my favorite piece of nonfiction ever. Like, yeah, of course. It's not the most enthralling piece of...
No, I mean, it's an impassionate job.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Like, I mean, I guess I should say it's a job that a lot of people wouldn't find interesting, but I think it's interesting, and I find it interesting because it's like I think it's an important task, and I think a lot of people, a lot of justices, or I would hope so, they take it very seriously, regardless of where they look at things politically. So if it's something super divisive, I think it's cool for people to write down why they dissent and the reasonings as to why. Because it's like, this isn't for the purpose of trying to change the court opinion. This is for the reasons to explain their way of looking at the interpretation of the law itself. And I think that's super informative, especially in instructing people on okay, should we go this way or that way? And it's like, okay, well, why do they see that? It could, you could disagree, you could agree, but understanding why is I think is key to bridging the gap between this group, that political party, and that political party. People who look at things this way at everything. People look at things that way for everything. So I look at stuff like that. So I'll look at my algorithms more so those deep dives into that kind of stuff. That's I'm gonna gain some information that's gonna help me understand people who look at things politically different than I do, more than what are people yelling about now? Because people are just complaining about everything. If I just, it's fucking exhausting if I just pursue everything that everybody's always yelling about. But, so yeah, that's why, a lot of that shit, it just goes under the radar for me. Because I'm just I don't, nah. But, that's why I think we're a good team. Because, you'll help steer me in that direction. And then it's just now, I start doing deep dives.
Well, now you just got me curious, and I'm going to try and find that, which is you said.
Yeah. What, Scalia's,
No, the chick.
Oh, okay.
But you can continue, and I'll pay attention.
Fair. But, but so you were telling me about Matt Taibbi, when I was looking at this, the Senate hearing, it would have been super cool, if they were, we were talking about, hey, okay, this sucks, it makes us look this way, why would you do this? I feel like you were hired by this person who I believe to have this bias against people from my side of the aisle. How do I know that this is legitimate? How do I know this is fair? How do I know your sources are fair? And just combing through the validity of it and blah blah blah. And then either he says cases or says some stuff that they find not to be valid, then they rip into that. That would make sense. You could do that.
Oh yeah, but they're all idiots at this point.
Or they could, if it was 100% verified, fact check, other side of the aisle did a similar fact check, you can't refute it, blah, blah, blah. They could be all right, fair. How many emails did you get? oh, you only got this many thousand? Like, maybe it was curated. Maybe it was only selective emails that he gave to you. Do you get carte blanche to get everything? And apparently he doesn't. So that's a misnomer. That's something that most people don't know. But you would know that looking at the fucking Senate hearing. It's like, or congressional hearing. It was just so... It was frustrating. It was infuriating. I'm like, I'm not getting anything from this. Like, they're just over here, like, taking these shots and childishly, like, grandstanding on whatever they think is correct and trying to paint them in this picture. And it's just, like, it was just ridiculous. I was just like... Because I think it's a good point to be like, all right, well, how do you know that the information that you're being fed is the whole picture? How do you know it's not just landed towards one side for one purpose or another? And at that point, he's like, short of being psychic, he would be like, I don't know that. I can't know that. I'm just using the information that I have. If I could probably try asking for this, or maybe someone on the wants to do another kind of investigation, wants to do this. Or they'd be like, well, how come you don't want to do that kind of investigation? Well, I haven't come across anything that would indicate that that is the reality of the situation. So until then, I'm just going to continue with my investigations. And he didn't say like, oh, I'm done. That's it. Finished. Like he's still combing through it. Like, I mean, it's years worth of documents, emails between all different kinds of people at Twitter. Like, there's so much information to comb through and so many nuances. And he's not the only person. Like, I think he releases it. I don't really know. Wait, does he release it? I think he releases his findings. I don't know if he releases Taibbi. I think he releases his findings. I don't think he releases the emails themselves. But either way, it's like, hey, then they could ask, hey, why don't you release the email so then everybody can analyze it? Like, that would have been something substantive. Like, there would have been something there that I'm like, oh, wow, that was valuable. But it wasn't. It was just like, it was just a moment for people to be like, yeah, wail on him, got him. Or for people to be like, hey, yeah, I saw that they wailed on you, huh, that's fucked up. It's like, all right. Like, it was frustrating. Yeah. But, yeah, I did a deep dive into that. What the fuck did they say? They called him a so-called journalist. Like, it's not a topic of debate. like this guy's profession for the last few decades. What the fuck are you talking?
Well, that's why they're all trying to smear him. That's why Malcolm tried to smear him.
Yeah.
That's why everyone else tried to smear him.
Yeah, and that created good context.
It's all dishonesty. It has nothing to. I mean, before the Twitter stuff, Matt Taibbi was just this independent journalist.
Yeah.
Who every now and then would go on Rogan and talk about
that's where I knew
that he or he would be like, he'd give some weird lecture.
Yeah. I haven't seen.
I mean, he would give like a lecture at like some weird event.
Yeah.
That none of us have heard of, but he's debating Douglas Murray on like intellectualism in the modern day.
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, so that sucked. But yeah, that debate, I think, put everything into context. Like, the reason as to why they were acting the way that they were acting there, I think, was revealed in the debate that he had. It was him, Michelle Goldberg, Malcolm Gladwell, and Douglas Murray. Yeah. It was great, because it was like they started diving into, and they're all journalists, not so-called journalists. But they were all diving into and wrestling with this idea of should the mainstream media be trusted, or is the mainstream media trusted anymore? And so there was a lot of parts of that debate that I found that I was like, oh, this is cool. I like this. But and then it just got to a point where it's like, some stuff was said. I was like, yep, that was not unnecessary, substantive, and it was just made me cry. But it was super revealing, and then when I put that in the context of, okay, not just the mainstream media, but like you were saying, the powers that be, the people in the political power, in positions of power, politically or financially, who are trying to push this agenda, I'm like, oh, this makes sense. Like, why would the Twitter act like this? It's like, okay, well, because they have this platform, they have all this money, they're in a position to be able to curate the kind of conversation that they think would be the most productive, and they want to eliminate the conversation that they think would be the least productive or even destructive by the way that they look at the world. So they're going to utilize the power that they have in order to make that happen. And I don't think that's something that's localized to one political party or another, one side or the other, or tech companies and nowhere else. I think that happens in general. So that's why mainstream media acts the way that they do, why corporate donors act the way that they do, and even private people who just make a lot of money. And shit, even people who don't make a lot of money sacrifice all that time to campaign and work like 80 hours a week to making phone calls to people and talking to them. Do you know how great this person is? It's like, yeah, everyone thinks, everyone's enacting their own form of prejudice. So there's nothing wrong with the prejudice, but I think it's necessary for them to acknowledge why they are where they are, as opposed to just enacting it and pretending like this is the end all be all.
I would agree.
Yeah. Shit. Even though Douglas and Matt Taibbi were arguing against Michelle and Malcolm, though Michelle pretty much said the same thing. She's like, yeah, I don't think you know what? Yeah, let me start using some clips. Haha! Advanced. Upgraded.
I don't necessarily disagree with Douglas that this kind of constant hygiene is necessary, that journalists need to, I don't even know if objectivity is the right frame, but there does need to be a sort of a constant conversation, institutional constraints, as well as, kind of a certain professional pride in being able to distinguish between what you hope is true and what you actually find.
But yeah, so I mean that right there was gold. I'm like, yeah. I mean, and she in the debate she was like, oh, I'm on the left side. This is the way that I look at things. And then she'll give examples throughout the debate about like, I look at things. I expected to find this, but I found that, and that was good. And that's the story that I published. And I was like, oh, so I think she's a stand-up person when it comes to that. Well, no, or at least she's presenting herself.
She's just more honest with what she's doing.
Yeah. And I think everybody should be honest in those terms. So they're like, okay, not that this is the right way, but okay, I tend to have this bias. And she said, I don't know if objectivity is the way to go because no one's objective. Everyone has a prejudice, and
she's defending it, but she's trying to probably explain it in a way that isn't as malicious as people are making mainstream media out to be.
Well, yeah, and that's her position. And
I'm just giving my interpretation of what she was trying to do. Whereas Malcolm was just, trying to figure out what race he was going to be for that day. Because is he black? Is he black?
Yeah, I did. I think he has like
God, he looked like Logic's dad.
Yeah. Like, young Sinatra.
I'm pretty sure you're passing as white.
Yeah.
Or like Mexican or something.
Yeah, he has some Jamaican in his somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought
that was so funny when
he's far removed.
I thought it was so funny when he was saying like people like me. It was like, God, like you could probably sit on the front of the bus. What are you talking about?
I got a tan. I was like, oh, okay. Jew hair.
He did look like he might have been Jewish.
Yeah.
I was so confused.
Yeah.
Because I'm watching it on I'm like half watching it, just listening, doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got it on my phone. And then when he made the comment about like, people like me, and I was like you, and I had to Google him and be like, yeah, he's something else, but I can't really pinpoint.
Yeah, a couple drops. So it was like, am I watching Tropic Thunder? What's going on here? Like,
but like you being black, like. What is it, 12%? Like that?
Yeah, you know what? The shit, man. I'm over here guesstimating.
Oh, I'm Navajo.
Yeah. I looked it up at one point, but I forgot. I know it was some. It was like some Jamaican.
I mean, he's obviously not completely white, but it was.
Yeah, I think his dad. Yeah, he was English-born Canadian journalist. Huh. Let's see. Early life. He was born in New Hampshire. His mother, Joyce, Jamaican psychotherapist. His father, was a mathematician professor from Kent, England. Yeah, so his mother was Jamaican. Father was English.
She must have been mixed.
Yeah, I think so.
Wait, free maternal ancestors was a Jamaican who was a free woman of color, mixed black and white, who was a slave owner?
Yeah, that's the thing. The Caribbean has a complex history.
That's hysterical. His family owned slaves.
I didn't think about it that way.
The black ones owned slaves. What a piece of shit.
You're very black, and the black that you have owned slaves. Oh, wow. Oh, man.
Wow. Projecting?
Oh, yeah.
Projecting much?
Yeah. You gotta make up for all the times, man.
Are you insecure about something? That's hysterical.
Guilty conscience.
That is black family owned slaves.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, Malcolm, the web you weave.
But yeah, we'll dive into it, man.
I'd heard of him before so many times, and I think I saw him on Rogan because I think he was on.
Oh
Rogan.
shit! I don't know. I looked him up after this. I was like, yo, what the fuck is happening?
And I was like, who? But then like that's the most I ever watched of him, and I was like, who is this idiot?
Yeah, like in this debate, he acted like an absolute buffoon. But when I looked him up, it was like, he had this cool take on.
Oh,
David.
You know what it is? It's a talking head on like CNN or Fox, but having to explain his thoughts for like an hour and a half.
Yeah. He's just like,
you know I mean?
You're not
somebody from the Fox Morning Show, Fox and Friends.
Yeah.
Just one of those idiots trying to talk for like an hour and a half. You'd be like, oh yeah, you're real dumb.
Okay. Yeah, I was. But
you don't know what Aleppo is.
It was wild. Yeah, man. Douglas, I cut that clip out. When I clip this down, I try to be like, all right, let's try to keep as close to the debate as possible, and then I try to stay away from the big ticket items that would make us fall into another conversation.
You probably couldn't avoid that with him.
Yeah. When he's just like,
I don't think he said anything that made any sense to me. Outside of the personal attacks that he was making on them.
It was wild, but yeah, we'll dive into it. But I mean, pretty much like it was like Matt Taibbi. Okay, he has this impression like, hey, we need to journalists. We need to be journalists. You know, you got to, and I feel like there's too much bias in the mainstream. And Michelle's like, yeah, well, I don't think that there's a lot of bias in the I mean, there's some bias, but she's like, I don't think that things are messed up because of the bias that exists. And then Douglas Murray, this was the first time I encountered him, and you had to tell me about him. And I was just like, oh, that's like super impressive. I was like, oh my God.
If there's anybody, look up his shit. He's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, I looked up a few things and I was like, oh man, yeah, really impressed. I like this. Yeah. And then Malcolm, like I think Malcolm, he started off strong. He was just like, oh, okay, like the opening comments, like, oh, all right, like he's at this point. And then like after that, it just fucking snowballed.
Also, you could tell by Murray as far as like the type.
You could tell by Murray.
That
I was giving.
It wasn't even a bad text. It wasn't even a big text. Why did I completely lose my train of thought? In the field of the people that will like watch on podcasts and everything like that, Murray might be. You could tell probably top tier. Like he might be the best one as far as like having a clear head every time he's talking about a point.
Yeah. He's super responsive to the moment.
what's being talked
Yeah,
about and
yeah.
not trying
Like
to
a
convey
prepared-
his own view
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah, that was
And
what
not
was most
doing
impressive.
it in a like this demeaning way, unless of course he's then attacked and then he has the intellectual ability to not come off across as petty, but at the same time still showcase to be like, you're an idiot.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of like, well, I have a cousin who is from Ghana, and she's like she doesn't use curse words, but the way that she talks to you, she's really mean sometimes, and like you kind of wish that she just cuss you out, and she'd just be like, "Wow, incredible! You managed to not understand a single thing from what we just listened to." Like that kind of shit. You're just like, just call me a dumbass, man. Don't be a dick. But yeah, that's what he reminds me of. Like, it was just, very impressive.
So what I was trying to get about that statement was, do you think? I mean, he obviously is aware who Douglas Murray is because he's in
that sphere.
That
Yeah,
sphere.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he has to know who he is, just like Murray has to know who Like I've never seen Malcolm Gladwell,
Yeah.
but I've heard his name dozens. Like I know of his existence.
Yeah.
So you would have to know going into that you're going up against arguably the best debater in that on that side, because I don't know if he's a conservative, but I mean,
yeah, I think he. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly,
he's on the Peterson team type shit. That's what I mean.
Yeah, I don't know.
But you have probably the best debater on that side. You think you would want to, come in with some extra armor and not come in with your training wheels.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I think Matt might
Murray's got like a renovated Harley from like the 60s. Malcolm's coming in with like a tricycle.
Yeah. Cling, cling. Yeah, he wasn't ready for that.
You're just racist, Douglas.
Yeah, that's what I think. That's why he didn't come. That's why he went after Matt instead of Douglas. He was just like,
well, he called him Doug.
Yeah. But like the passive aggressive snipes. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think Douglas is more Peterson type. I think Matt. At least in recent, because I haven't really heard anything from him that makes me think he would lean conservative or not. But I think now, because of everything that's happening, he's like, oh, the Democrats this, and it's like, oh, he has some vitriol towards them, understandably, after what the fuck happened at the fucking hearing. So I mean, it's just I get it.
Did something happen after that?
No, he just went on some talk shows and he's just like, yeah, the Democrats that was like a lazy attempt at trying to discredit me, and
because it was.
Yeah, it was. Which it was. It was super lazy.
It was worse than Malcolm.
Oh yeah.
Because at least Malcolm latched on to he latched on and then completely misrepresented what he said.
Yeah.
But at least it was something he said and he could manipulate.
Yeah.
They were just like, well, what are your credentials? It's like, I don't need credentials to be able to research something and then show the evidence of that.
They just questioned. They didn't even like, what are your credentials? They just said, oh, you don't have any credentials. What their implication was, so-called journalists. It's like, all right, okay. And it's so funny because the first person that I saw speak on that committee was
it the black chick?
Yeah, she was a big.
She's not even an elected member of Congress. She's an aide. Or
she,
like an appointed something.
Well, she played a big role. I recognize her. She played a big role in
what, the
shutting down. I don't know if she did or not, but I recognize her because she's one of the people who played a big role in shutting down the Bernie Sanders run when he was running for the Democratic side. The one.
How did you find that out?
Like she was it's my fucking algorithm. I just went down so like I did research upon research. Like, okay,
Oh, is she
I saw
connected
that
to
shit.
emails and the
No.
WikiLeaks?
No. She's the one. She was one of the people who like who came up with some of the plans to like shut down Ernie's momentum. So there's like the plan of like, okay, only people who
Jeez,
have
that
registered
kinda stinks.
Democrat for like 10 years can vote. So because Bernie was noticeably beating Hillary.
So you did a little bit of a deep dive and found.
Yeah. So
Well, she's like an appointed member for something. So I mean, she's not even an elected politician, and then she's calling him a so-called. It's so gross when people use words like that.
yeah. But yeah, man. But like everybody, like the debate itself, like So I mean that shit is not even worth going to. But the debate I think was cool. I think everybody's opening was impressive except Michelle. Michelle tried to like take a swing at Matt Taibbi, but it wasn't like in bad faith. I think she was just like, oh, I think you're just wrong on this point. So she tried to point that out, but then she was wrong. So she was just like, oh, okay. But then after that, it was like she came up with some great points, and there was like real adult conversation. And then Malk just like metamorphosized into like this weird like elitist asshole who thought he was talking to 10-year-old kids. And it's just like it was just like I think he did himself like such a disservice in that debate. Because I looked up, like I said, I did deep dives. I started looking into his stuff, and he's very intelligent, and he has a lot of stuff.
Well, not anymore.
Not in that moment. But it's like he has a lot of stuff that like showcases that he understands the nuances. Like he had a thing. I think he wrote a book about why people who grow up in different perspectives are able to or would have different levels of achievement. Like, and it's like I think he did a really good job of showcasing that, at least in the.
Yeah, but now he showed me what his ethics are.
Yeah, and that was ridiculous. So he's really quite literally a buffoon. But yeah, we could start diving down into.
When you decide in advance to forego half of your potential audience to cater to the other half, you're choosing in advance which facts to emphasize and which to downplay, based on considerations other than truth or newsworthiness. Until we get back to the basics, we don't deserve to be trusted, and we won't be.
So I'm not standing up here and arguing that the media never gets anything wrong, and that the media is full of human beings who are subject to all of the frailties that human beings are subject to, right? The media can be subject to groupthink, it can be subject to fads, absolutely. What I want to argue is that the media doesn't get things wrong because of ideological capture.
CBC said that 2 Indigenous women were so scared to go outside in Ottawa because of racist violence didn't bother to mention that Indigenous drummers had led the truckers in an O Canada rendition. The Globe and Mail reporter said, my 13-year-old son told me to tell protesters I'm not a Jew out of fear of anti-Semitic violence, without mentioning that one of the leaders of the convoy was himself Jewish. We're not saying don't read the mainstream media. We're just saying don't trust them.
The mainstream media has a set of professional norms in place that work the best way they can towards the production of fairness and accuracy. The non-mainstream media is a set of institutions that are outside of that tradition, that have an open and not a closed platform. And you cannot have an open platform and simultaneously adhere to a strict set of professional norms.
So, I mean, Matt's, I think, was pretty straightforward. It's like, all right, this is how I feel about this. This is not good. This is why it's not good. Michelle, she was just like, I think she contradicted herself a little bit. And she said, I took out like the bad stuff in her intro, but I think it was a slight contradiction because she was just like,
I think she was. I'm assuming there was more to their statements, and you're just
yeah.
Okay.
I chopped it up.
So I think of what that is covering stories that that are wrong. So it's like we think this is where this is going. We believe we have some evidence. We're going more into it. Yeah. We report on it. That turns out that it's wrong. It's not wrong because it's a liberal leaned or a right leaned thing. It's just we fucked up and
Yeah.
So she's probably focusing more on like the stories themselves are legitimate,
Right.
regardless of how one-sided they may seem.
Yeah, like sometimes you follow this.
At least that's my
follow this
guess.
carrot. Yeah. It was like and maybe it's not here that she had that I thought she had the contradiction, but she was just but I think it very much in line with what you were saying, what she was all about. Yeah, trying to go to the main one or
What is this?
I'm
confused.
It does some weird stuff. Yeah, this is.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh man, it's hot. Well, yeah, like she said some. I'd agree with you. Like that's exactly where I think she's coming from, and she's probably seen a whole bunch of critiques of the mainstream media, or even where she works at, and she's just firing back against the worst of it. I'm sure she doesn't sit there and filter like, I wonder if there's any legitimate reasons for why they're doing it, because she has X amount of faith in her ability and her team's ability to do what they're supposed to do. So, and then Douglas was like, oh, "Yep, this magazine said this paper said that."
That was all of the what is it? The caravan in Canada. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah. So it was and I thought his endpoint was pretty solid. He's just like, yeah, I'm not saying don't consume it, just saying not to trust it. That's it. And Malcolm's opening was pretty solid too. He's just
I mean, at this point, I don't read any of it. So.
Yeah, it's me.
Why would I read any of it when I can just watch somebody in detail break it down?
Yeah.
In a YouTube video.
No, that's true. And then especially because if they have
no point to read an article.
Well, like if they have like a lot of people have like ideological slants, so like if you just blindly just opening it up,
I can't do that shit.
Reading it, like
I'm opening articles and with it, like I flunked out of community college, and within 2 sentences, I'm completely picking up on the tone and the energy, and I'm like, this is just this is gross on like an infantile level, and I can't do this.
Yeah, so that's true. Like if you're doing it, it's good like to have things on record. So like if you're looking for a specific thing, and then you go back like, oh, what did this guy from this person, he writes about that. What did he say way back then about this specific thing? Like that, it's cool reference point to go back and do in-depth research. If
but
you
just most of the articles.
Yeah, but
like I'll show you some like the first couple sentences. I mean.
Yeah,
I'll screenshot it and send it, and you'll just start like laughing.
Yeah,
like what is this?
Yeah, 100%. I don't sit there. It's way more. And if you just really want to do deep dives, it's better to read books than to read articles or newspapers, because it's going to be slanted one way or another. So like the articles are like, good thing of record. You're going to do like in-depth analysis to see a specific thing that a specific person said on a specific day. But if you just want to know more about a specific subject, like there's so many more better materials to look at. Mm-hmm. So, for that reason. But I mean, what I could understand Malcolm's perspective, like, oh well, we have these things in place that mandate that we do this, and he's probably looked at a couple again, like. Far-reaching independent journalists that are so-called journalists who are doing stuff, and he's like, this doesn't have any of the earmarks of what I have to put in order to verify whether this information is correct or not. So he just labels it all as bullshit.
Oh.
So I'm like, all right. So I mean, so far so good. This is shaping out to be a good debate. So I mean, like,
these are just opening.
Yeah. We're like, we dive back in. Yeah, we're like,
Malcolm, you seem to think I've never worked in the mainstream media. I spent 15 years at Rolling Stone. I spent all that time writing 7,000 word features that had to be fact checked every line. I'm absolutely familiar with the process of mainstream media, and that's why I'm so disappointed in what happened. The New York Times and the entire, basically, mainstream media spent years following a fake story, and it only happens if everybody wants so badly for it to be true that they overlook all the guardrails that are in place. Yes, there are processes in place, and there was once an ethos in place, but that ethos is gone now. And maybe the processes remain, but there are too many errors proving otherwise.
He's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's solid. I mean, those even parts. Yeah, 100%. There you go. He just defended himself better than anybody else.
I mean, there's nobody you can't prove or disprove what he's saying.
Yeah.
So it's just.
But it was cool because it was just like, I was like, okay, this is shit.
That's what. Okay, I'm glad I heard this because I forgot what he did. His past.
Oh, okay.
Remember, like the so-called journalist.
Yeah.
15 years being one of the main writers for Rolling Stone magazine. You're a journalist.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that's
like
a while.
Hunter S. Thompson, so-called writer.
Oh, JK. But yeah, like, and there was even a part where Malcolm like is turned to him and he's like, "Oh yeah, you've done this."
I've covered the far right. I showed up at the Ottawa trucker protests kind of expecting the sort of things that I've seen at Donald Trump rallies, at various even further right events. I told my editors that this is what I found, and they said, great. That's more interesting than what we thought you were going to find. It was more interesting. And I wrote it, and they devoted an entire page to it. I'm not going to defend all of the mainstream media coverage of the Ottawa trucker protests. I didn't follow every single bit of reporting on it in the Canadian media. But I do think that having the ethos of wanting to be surprised and being willing to be surprised is something that you are more likely to find in, the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in people who write, in the New Yorker, than it is with people who do write for some of these contrarian alternatives to the mainstream media.
The mainstream media.
That space bar so fast.
Well, no, I did it quick because I didn't want to lose track of what was happening. I mean, I don't agree with that at all.
Well, I mean, like, she's going off of her own personal.
Yeah, but like Cosmopolitan isn't going to start posting how women should probably have fewer sexual partners.
Yeah. No, that's true. But it's just,
it'll help with you being able to be able to connect with your mate long term.
Yeah.
No, it's going to teach you blowjob tricks.
Yeah, man. I mean, I agree with you.
Also,
man.
like the entire. The president of Canada called them white supremacists.
Yeah.
So when it was clearly it was just blue collar workers who were we're being attacked.
And I clipped the beginning part out just because it was real long. But she said when this is one of the people I was interviewing is like, oh, why are you here? And then he's like, man, mushrooms, man. It's just this is average Joe. It's just
I don't think that's what the main.
Yeah, she's talking about her.
People like Fox or Breitbart or The Blaze. They're talking about how amazing this is, or how they're pushing back and and then the other sides are going to be doing the exact opposite and talking about how. Remember, there was one guy with a Nazi flag or something like that, and they were like, it's a neo-Nazi event, and it was one person out of 20,000 people.
Yeah. So I mean, it's very true, man. But it's
or was it a Confederate flag?
I couldn't tell you.
You know what I'm talking about. There was one truck with a flag, and then they tried to make that out to be the whole thing.
Yeah, it was just that kind of shit. We don't even look at shit like that just because it's it's not even substantial because people are just gonna try to label it one way or another in order to fit their narrative. Now, granted, I'm sure there's writers out there, mainstream and otherwise, who do due diligence to just report the facts.
I'm sure you can find an article where somebody that worked at CNN or the New York Times criticized Obama.
Exactly.
That doesn't mean that he got away with murdering Yemenis.
Exactly. So, no, he did. It's but
we were calling for George Bush to be brought up on potential war crimes for knowingly taking part or knowingly torturing people and then going into Iraq and lying about it. And then we then turn around and topple the Libyan government, and that's...
Yeah.
Look at... You know, he might be the greatest president we've ever had. It's like...
Here's your peace prize.
Oh, the peace prize. Do you want a peace prize? Well, I'm going to murder a lot of brown people. I'm just going to let you know ahead of time.
Yeah, man. Like, it's... that's pretty dark
In
shit.
about a year and a half, I'm going to kill 35 people at a wedding.
Fuck.
And it's going to be a whoopsies.
Yeah, can we do take backsies on the peace prize?
Let me address.
Oh my bad. To say real fast, like, I mean, I could see there's probably individual people, and maybe even more on the it's not working good. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
But it's not. It's there's probably more people in mainstream that are doing more due diligence than percentage wise than people outside of mainstream media.
Well, I mean,
but it's not. Okay, like just real fast. Like it's not that. We're not saying which one is the better place to get information from. It's just, like, is the mainstream media trusted? Like, as in, couldn't you go, like how Douglas said.
Well, that's it. Her writing an article or presenting a piece in the way that it was in a directing way where we're trying to generate an emotional response.
Yeah.
That's not the norm.
Yeah.
And of what I was about to interrupt you on, it's about like the clicks.
Yeah.
It's about views and clicks and who's watching this and the clips on YouTube and the articles that we're putting out and throwing ads with, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and it's a gripping headline that has no basis in fact at all, but people click on it.
Yeah.
And then like the lazy or the articles that I was talking about with you, where I would screenshot a weird structure of sentences, like that's generated to get people either to read it and go yes, or to read it and go they're getting it wrong. So it has nothing to do with even ethically reporting it.
Yep, 100%. But I do understand. From her perspective, I mean, she's a writer, and she even says, "I don't cover what everybody else does." Well, I mean, she might, and then she's lying about it, or she doesn't because there's not enough time in the day. Like I just got to focus on my own shit, and if I'm doing my shit right, then that's all I'm worried about. I think she just trusts that everybody in her industry, in the mainstream, operates the same exact way, and she's unaware of the bias.
She's aware
how
of
her
it.
bias.
She just has to defend it because she's part of it.
Yeah, but it's just wild. Like her maybe she's choosing not to speak on how her bias might slant her ability to report on the facts. Which is I think.
Well, she did
from what
show
she
up
says,
on stage to defend this, so she's not gonna.
Yeah.
She's not gonna be like, I came here to defend this, but you guys are all right.
Yeah, that's true, man. Well, but that's what I said. I think she really does believe this. I don't think she's speaking out of bad faith.
She's trying to actually do her best to defend mainstream media, whereas Malcolm is he eventually is just going to go on to do everything he can to infantilely smear his opponents.
Let me address the main point that has come out from the other side, which is the mainstream media has frailties. Sure, it has frailties. And nobody is saying that non-mainstream media don't have frailties. Of course they do. The simple proposal in front of the audience tonight is whether or not you can trust the mainstream media. That is, that you don't need anything else. You don't need any other information from elsewhere. You can just turn on CBC in the evening and you've got your stuff. You can pick up the New York Times, the Washington Post in the morning, and you know that there's no spin on the story. It's absolutely accurate reporting. Story disappears. That would have been a really interesting story to keep on at. But it just goes away because the narrative isn't the one that the mainstream media wanted. It's too complex. So I applaud you, Michelle, when you go and find complex stories and you explain the complexity. But that's not the habit of the mainstream media anymore.
A couple things that I'm puzzled over. One is that I thought that since you guys were in favor of the proposition, you would at some point have given us a definition of what you meant when you used the phrase mainstream media. I'm still waiting for that, because what it seems to me that you're doing is you're giving a bunch of very cogent and accurate critiques of the media, but the proposition before us is not that the media behaves nicely and well all the time. It's whether the mainstream media does. And without you giving us any direction about what you mean with that phrase, I'm a little lost. I was greatly amused by the affection Matt Taibbi has for the age of Walter Cronkite, which he seemed to hold up as a kind of golden moment. In that moment, the mainstream media was populated entirely by white men from elite schools. Why you would have had such affection and say that's the gold standard, and we should trust the mainstream media precisely at the moment when the mainstream media is least representative, is really puzzling to me. I would point out that at the height of Walter Cronkite's reign in American media, neither people like Michelle and I would have been on the stage. Right? We weren't part of the conversation. So I don't know why we should hold such a kind of affection for that moment.
Wait, 3 seconds. 3 seconds. Go ahead.
Kind of affection for that moment.
Okay, go ahead.
They've had live debates with Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Martin Luther King, live interviews.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's the iconic footage of the mainstream media reporting and showing the video of Martin Luther King like shaking hands with JFK.
No, they used to have they used to have like extreme. Oh, what was it? Like those are like.
How did we get the video footage of the race race riots?
Well, you know, it was probably people walking around with
their cameras. We have the video of dogs attacking and ripping at black people, and the cops. There's like one where the guy, like 2 people are carrying a guy and he's got like blood coming from his head and his arms are slumped. It's kind of iconic. I forget which one it is, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like all of that came from news reporting on those issues.
Yep.
It really doesn't matter that they were white and doing it.
Right. So I mean, if he wants to make that claim,
what about the women's movements?
I mean, you know what's crazy? Exactly during that time. But what's crazy about that shit's bananas, you know. But I think exactly for that reason it's crazy. Like, well, what does it? In the time we are
stage.
You know,
how did you get
talking
Malcolm
about
X was talking about like white people being like termites or some shit like, and then he gets to go on like ABC and do it.
Malcolm X was light work compared to some of the people that were like there was some like really strong advocates for segregation or like actually making it even and like that made Malcolm X look like Gandhi. Like there was some really, and they were covered by the mainstream media as well. So it's like it's a solid point. What you're saying is a solid point because we know that back in that time there was a problem with black people being able to get those kind of jobs. But we also know and have video evidence from the mainstream media,
people reporting on it,
especially back in the day when there was only a handful of news organizations that even existed.
When Martin Luther King got assassinated. Whoever was, he wasn't like, and that goddamn monkey's finally put to rest. Like they were just like, we are saddened to let you know that Martin Luther King has been killed.
Yeah.
They weren't like, free at last, you motherfucker.
Yeah. So I think
like with a smile, Martin Luther King's been killed.
Yeah. Take that, Malcolm Gladwell in the future. But it's so that is a crazy assertion. So it's like when I watched this point, I'm like, wait, like especially after what everybody else said, I was just like, okay, well,
didn't somebody even report on like the Tulsa massacre?
Yeah. So I mean, it was.
I mean, if that didn't really hit necessarily
it was a big news.
But I mean, like people, it's documented.
Yeah. At least I know there's photographs of it. I don't know if the mainstream media covered it. But that being said, like
But that happened in like the 40s,
substantial
right?
stuff.
That happened in the 40s or 30s. It might have been even.
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know.
It wasn't during TV.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, TV as we know it as like
regular. Yeah. Everyone has a box, but so it's a ridiculous claim. So like after everyone said what he said, like I think Matt was like, "Hey, I got experience. I'm worried about the ethos." She was like, "Hey, this is my personal anecdotal experience. This is the way I think everybody operates. I think the ideological capture isn't as crazy as you think it is." What's his face was like trying to echo way more eloquently in a few words what we've been trying to wrestle with for like 10 minutes.
Address
and then fucking Malcolm just ignored all of it.
No. I'm not talking about it. He didn't even address if there was untrustworthy news being reported about women or black people.
Yeah.
The existence of a white news reporter doesn't mean that he is not capable of accurately reporting a story on a black issue.
Yeah, there it is. That's it. That's the treasure chest right there. Like, the fuck are you talking about? Like,
you'd have to be like, well, Walter Cronkite was famous for saying that there is no issues of police brutality in black communities, and then it'd be like, wow, I didn't know that. That's fucking horrifying.
And that's the way it is.
And then that would be like,
I don't remember that clip.
Well, no, you're right. I'm saying like,
I know. I'm trying to use your sarcasm.
If that existed, that would be like a death blow punch to Matt Taibbi saying that. But to just say that because Walter Cronkite's white. Yeah. And there was no other white newscasters with him. That also, we now it just makes zero sense.
Also, he mischaracterized what Matt said. Matt said that the mainstream media was trusted back in this time, and this is the reason as to why. He said, "Oh, you're advocating that we should trust them." It's like, no. As a matter of fact, it was more trusted. People trusted. I'm not advocating for us to go back to a time where all white people, but for whatever reason, it was more trusted back then. It's not as trusted now. So that was mischaracterization. Also, all the way up to this point of the debate, CNBC, New York Times, everyone's been talking about specific sites, specific news articles.
Everybody knows what the mainstream media is.
Well, everybody, damn near everybody has mentioned a name. Everybody has mentioned a name, almost. Well, at least Michelle and Douglas Murray have mentioned the name of what they believe encapsulates mainstream media, and Malcolm himself.
It's the largest newspaper publications. And the national network news channels. That's what.
Well, like
I can't do this.
He defended mainstream media himself, and then it's just and now he's pretending like he doesn't understand. Okay.
So what's happening?
Round 2 of the rebuttals. So they go through the second round of.
Okay, no, to the left. That's.
I couldn't
back
read.
to facts.
Defining the mainstream media is simple. I talked before about a bifurcated system, where we have essentially two politically homogenous audiences. We have Fox News and conservative media on one side. The mainstream media, roughly speaking, is the other side. And yes, as I said in my speech, the old system under Walter Cronkite had its flaws, but it did have its advantages as well. Making the effort to talk to everybody garnered more trust in the public. There is a reason why people trusted news people more 20 or 30 or 40 years ago than they do now. Now, when people meet someone from the New York Times or from the Washington Post or from MSNBC out in middle America, they don't talk to them. You cannot get, those interviews are very difficult to get now because people perceive those institutions to be not on their side. Think about the WMD episode. We talked about the haloed processes of the mainstream media. Everybody got this wrong. And not only did they get that wrong, after they got it wrong, they promoted all the people who were the most wrong and fired all the people who were the most right.
Who was that in the background?
Oh, I didn't clip that as well. The speaker had or the moderator had said something.
It's just funny that it was just
That's what he said. It was like no, but yeah, it was. I mean, I think right there it's like people could say, "Oh yeah, Matt's biased." He might be because he's like, "Oh, the mainstream, everyone on the left." It's like, yeah, and in the beginning, one opening statements, he had mentioned that Fox is also part of the problem when it comes to the ideological battle that's happening, and the problem with the mainstream. So it's like, yeah,
well, he's not the best public speaker.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, they could say that he's biased, but what they can't say is that anything that he said was.
Someone's gonna say something.
Well, you can't. I'm trying to understand it. Like, what you can't say is anything that he said was a callback to, like, oh, please let there be more white people.
Well, I know what's coming.
But real fast, I also want to mention, I have to write notes for everything, but he said, that he brought up the WMDs, which I thought was really cool, because it's like, oh, well, I mean, the people who were really pushing for the WMD, like, everybody got it wrong, but the people who were really promoted and people who were, fired, it's like that offense probably happened more on the right-wing side than anything else. So it's like, even though he's biased, or he might be biased, he definitely is talking about the issue overall, free of political bias.
So I guess the point that I keep coming back
we'll
to
see
is
how
that
long
this
it takes for
critique
the
of the mainstream media, and particularly this critique of the mainstream media, is kind of ideologically blinkered, is itself, I think, rooted in a very simplistic and distorted view of what's happening both in politics and in the relationship between the media and politics.
What she said was pretty negligible. I think she just, at that point, she's just calling back. She has a lot more to say, but it was more like about specific stories, and I don't really want to jump into that because it's going to be long enough as it is. But I think it's just called back to how she felt before, like, oh, well, people are just wrong because they just don't understand the complexities of everything.
Malcolm Gladwell said we need to define mainstream media. If we haven't, it's because I spoke to the organisers before this tonight saying, are we going to spend the whole of the debate debating what the mainstream media definition should be? And they assured me not. But we can do. Let me do it in shorthand. The mainstream media, in my view, would be, for instance, things like government-subsidised media that say what the government wants them to say. I would say that it was the legacy media, the newspapers we used to trust once and we don't trust anymore, the ones that used to be the papers of record and which have slowly descended into just partisan hackery of whatever their own particular peccadillos are that month. Malcolm, you did a little nasty jab there, I noticed, at Matt, by trying to pretend that Matt Taibbi is desperate for the era of white men in broadcasting. Takes a certain chutzpah to make that claim, but I don't see any reason why that is the case with Matt. I don't think that you are hankering desperately for a world of white news presenters. We've only just met, but you didn't give off that vibe to me.
That was awesome. So, like, I think he had a much better definition of what mainstream media was. He's clearly the better talker, of course. We talked about that in the beginning. And I like how aware he was, like, all right, yeah, that was.
Because Matt Taibbi, he's like a.
Yeah.
He's meant to be a journalist.
Yeah, right. But which is why I appreciate Douglas being on there. But he was just, oh yeah, by the way, this is what the definition is for you,
okay,
like, as you asked for it, and yeah, this is hey, what you did was wrong, and we'll see what Malcolm's response was.
I was astonished to listen as Matt Taibbi doubled down on his defense of Walter Cronkite. I feel like there should be a giant picture of Walter Cronkite behind. And he said, the most incredible quote was, Walter Cronkite, the era of that era in journalism was distinguished by journalists, quote, making the effort to talk to everybody. Now, he's talking about the 1950s and 60s. I just wanted to make a short list of the people who were not spoken to by journalists in the 1950s and 60s. And you may want to add some, if I miss some, black people, women, poor people, gay people, people with mildly left-wing views. I mean, words fail me when somebody, when it presented with a critique of his rather idiosyncratic position on Walter Cronkite, comes back and says, "Oh no, there's more to my great love of this man." The other thing that struck me in their comments was there's a weird obsession with the two of them with the notion that the media occasionally gets things wrong. And I wonder if they have confused the role of journalists with that of stockbrokers. Stockbrokers have to get their predictions right, but journalists don't. The job of a journalist is to use that famous phrase, to afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And sometimes that means you go down some dead ends and you chase stories that don't turn out as you want them or wish them or hope that they would turn out. But that is the nature of the business. And if that business seems uncomfortable to you, then I would suggest you should go into stockbroking.
I don't want to react to this.
Oh, this is so good. All right, I'll calm down. Well, like, fun fact: Walter Cronkite started reporting for the major, what is it? NBC.
NBC, I believe.
In '62. So it wasn't the 50s and 60s. It was the 60s and 70s. So, because he was big for 18 years, I think. I think that was how long his run was. But he did start earlier than that.
What does that statement even mean?
Which one?
Talking to women or talking to black?
Well, like, the thing is, like we've just discussed before.
There needed to be an article about how to properly lock your hair?
Ooh. No,
like,
but
what the fuck does that mean?
It was just fun. But the thing is that it's fundamentally wrong. There was plenty of black people and plenty of women that were interviewed in the 60s and 70s.
But, no, I'm just talking about what does that even mean? Is it a cosmopolitan fucking magazine?
Oh.
Well, I know, I'm being honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think like he was trying to paint this picture.
There was a volcano eruption in Thailand.
Yeah.
X amount of people died. Well, you're not talking to women.
Yeah. It's like
they're reporting the news. You
right.
Milk chicken.
Right. Well, how come there's not a lot of women?
Did you miss my milk chicken reference?
No, wait.
From Prison Break. Confused.
Chicken.
You don't know what side you're on. You're a milk chicken.
Oh wow, man. Well, yeah, it was kind of disturbing because, like, okay, one, it's wrong, and two, if you're just talking about in general, how come there weren't more men and black people? It's because at that time there weren't a lot of black people and women in positions that reporters would go out and communicate with. So as time progressed, things changed. But that doesn't mean that fundamentally that they weren't talking to men and women. Black men and women. They were talking to plenty. There were hundreds of women and black people that were talked to.
No, I that's not what they're referring to. He's talking about the voice. He's not talking about getting interviewed.
No, yeah, he is. The one before this, he was talking about there weren't a lot of It was prized by like white people. Are you fucking me up
because you didn't get the full clip?
I might be, man. I'm sorry. The first one was the first time that he mentioned it. It was like, oh, there are not a lot of black people. Me and Michelle wouldn't have been on the stage. Like we wouldn't have been reporters.
But that's not talking to. That's difference. That's representation.
Yeah. So that's the first time. The first time he was talking about representation. The second time in this one, because Matt Taibbi said like, oh well, we're not. Before it was trusted more because. Before everyone, they talk to everybody. Now they don't, and he gave specific examples that they don't. And now he's trying to fire back, like, oh well, they weren't talking to black people and women. It's like, yeah, they were. They're specifically.
I don't want to talk about this
specifically-
anymore. This is so anger.
But they were specifically talking about
I don't care, Robert.
black issues and women issues.
We already talked about it.
We did. This is true. We don't have to come through all of it. But I thought it'd be
We
fun.
can continue. I'm just saying I can't do this one.
Oh, sorry. Well, I get it, but like, so I'll finish up. I'll finish up real fast because he said 50s and 60s. Nope, it's 60s and 70s. He said no black people, women. Nope, there's plenty of black people, women. He says mildly left wing leaning. There was plenty of mildly and severely.
No. That's false. The country as a whole was not. There was nobody that had a radical left. A radical left.
In that
a radical left opinion would be like a fucking food kitchen. Soup kitchen.
Yeah,
that would be a radical left
for that time. And there's plenty of soup kitchen people that were interviewed back in that time.
Trans rights in 1940. Go fuck yourself.
Right. So that's why I'm saying he says mildly left leaning. I'm like, wait, in that time, like contextually, you have to put things.
The culture as a whole was conservative.
You're right,
and your left policies were like, well, do we increase taxes?
Right, and those people were covered in the news media. So you say that those people weren't covered, it's like, yeah, they were. So when he was like, words fail me, it's like, yeah. So does history, man. Like,
please just go to the next one. This doesn't benefit anybody.
This is why my algorithm is set up the way it is.
I hate you.
Oh man.
What's the next
one?
one?
No, but the one thing that he did say, like, I mean, on this last bit when he said the predictions. Like, well, first I like his quote when he says afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. Like, I was like, oh, that was a beautiful quote. Too bad it was like married with all this other bullshit. And then he compared like stockbrokers. Like, no one said anything about predicting it to be right. The conclusions, after you write the story, you don't write things based off of predictions. That's the whole reason why there's the process that you were talking about in the first place. In order to avoid talking about predictions. You might have a prediction, you chase down the story, there's no story there. Fine, it's done. You wouldn't be able to publish it.
You don't latch onto the story, produce it, and put it out there for 2.5 years, and then it turns out that, oh, yep, sorry, that was a lie.
Yeah. So, yeah, that wasn't based on no goddamn prediction, so, dummy. Okay, shit.
It's this debate and the issue of trust, because let's get back to our resolution. Be it resolved, don't trust mainstream media. For some in Malcolm and Michelle's camp, it's about a process. It's about a commitment to a learning, a teaching, a profession. Why isn't that a reason to feel that there is something very special about the mainstream media versus Substack, where you work, where, I don't know, I assume those types of things are somewhat arbitrary as to whether your fellow contributors on Substack really care about fact-checking or care about searching out the other side to a story or to an opinion.
Once upon a time, I think journalists were more interested in what was true and what was not true than whether or not this fit the narrative or not. So, yes, there are processes. Fact-checking is important. I do it. I hire fact-checkers to do it. But this is not the standard process for all mainstream media institutions anymore. We don't do it as much as we used to.
We don't do that as much as we used to for financial reasons. I mean, I worked at The New Yorker. The New Yorker, if anything, spends more money on fact-checking today than it did in the past. I would have thought, with my first book, I didn't hire a fact-checker, but then I observed the number of errors in it. I also observed that the nature of the journalism world in which we live, the scrutiny of journalists is such that it's really perilous not to have a fact-checker, and so now I have fact-checkers. Many other people, I think, have observed the same thing, that there is now so much attention paid to the accuracy of things that writers say that you'd better make sure you don't have errors in your... So, I mean, Matt, I understand that you do have this wonderful nostalgia for the way things used to be, but I think that you need to fact check some of your nostalgic notions about the wonderful world of the 1950s. Who was watchdogging the New York Times in the 1950s? Nobody was. It was a tiny little universe of people now watchdog institutions like that until they have a higher commitment to the truth.
So that was actually.
I don't really have anything to say yet.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I like the moderator kind of ignored all the claims of like white supremacy that he was throwing.
He can't address it.
Yeah, but I thought it was like real skillful the way he did it, and then he's like, okay, and then he like reframed the question in a way to get the thing back on topic, and then he was like,
life finds a way.
Yeah. Instead of attacking Matt Taibbi, he was just like, well, like your fellow contributors on Substack, like and said it. Framed it in that kind of way. So I thought that was masterfully done. And then I think the point of fact checking is like, all right, this is pretty solid. And then I think
that's bullshit.
Well, I think the way that Malcolm, I think that Malcolm. Well, yeah, I think when they're talking about fact checking, I think Malcolm made a pretty good point. Like, and he talked about his personal anecdote and the fact that he's still in the mainstream gives him more grounds to stand on than someone who's outside the mainstream media as to the amount of fact checking that the mainstream media does. So I was like, although it might be biased, it's like, all right, well, that's a pretty solid leg to stand on. And then he took another swing at the 50s, even though Cronkite started in the 60s. But he made a good point. Who was watchdogging back then? Nobody really was. Now they are.
They had journalistic integrity.
Yeah, and the fact that
and there was only like 2 channels to watch, so they didn't have this like burning desire where we need people or we need to like get eyes on the product. Also, no ad revenue.
Yeah.
Or whatever ad revenue there was, it was
way different.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. But like I think, but
I'm sorry, you weren't fighting for ad revenue.
Yeah. You're not. There's not as much competition, and there's not a lot.
There wasn't any competition.
Yeah, and there was like people who could walk on and like, okay, let me just do all this research to try to check you in real time whether you're wrong or not.
Well, also the way society was, if you fucked up, it was like a huge issue.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you're wrong about an article today, or like you misspeak and have false information, who gives a shit? You're still going to be brought on. I mean, obviously there's like a degree of how atrocious it would be, but like if you missed a story, like Tucker Carlson isn't losing his job on Fox News.
Yeah. But like
he's still gonna have his primetime slot.
But you'll get ripped apart by like people online, like, oh, this idiot, da da da. But like that,
that's the point. Yeah. But whereas like back in the day, that's an issue.
Yeah. But also like there weren't people back in the day to really. Not everybody could pick up their phone or like would run to the library and double check to see if the information that they just got from the news was factual or not. So assuming that Malcolm is right, like let's say, like I think in Malcolm's mind, what he's trying to say is that back then they were so much more terrible at the news than they are now, and now the process is so good because there's so much watchdogging. If that's the case, I mean,
but the watchdogging exists because you suck at your job.
Well, I mean, chicken or the egg. I'm not even I'm just saying. Assuming
but that's why the watchdogs exist, is because they know you can't trust them.
Yeah, and I get that perspective. But
is Donald Trump a real contender? I don't know. Well, we're about to make him one.
Right. But no, I was just saying. Like within even like I would imagine that that's not the point that he's making. I would imagine that in his mind, just watchdogging is just a thing that exists now that didn't exist back then, and we're so much better now than we were back then. Assuming that that's correct, assuming that that's his framework, then he's arguing that okay, well we're way better now because of this whole process.
That still would bring the point of being that those entities exist is because they don't trust you to be accurate.
So he just dismantled what he just said.
Yeah, but
he just dismantled his own fucking point by what he said. Because he's just like, by his own admission, even under the most wild of circumstances of like his interpretation of news back in the day, it's because why would people watchdog if they trust you? Why would you check the missus's phone if you trust her? Why would you go to the park after the kid says they're at the park if you trust them? If you trust, you're not going to waste the energy. So he's dismantling what he said, and also this flies in the face of what he was talking about before when it comes to predictions, because it's like maybe he's mad that he's not as good as stockbrokers.
What's
It's so strange hearing you debate, Malcolm, because you listen to nothing that your opponents say. It's quite extraordinary. I've met it before, but never quite so badly as it occurs in you. You keep saying things that neither of us have said, and then you try to pathologize what we say. You decide to say things like, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. If it comes from this side, it's a conspiracy theory. You say, we don't do our research, we're just conspiracy theorists. Apparently mild dose of it, he says, in his excellent medical-like analysis of his opponents. We just have a mild dose. No, Malcolm, why don't you listen to what comes out of our mouths and try to learn something from it, as I am with you this evening? But at the moment, all I get is you dismissing every single story we come up with, every egregious failure of the mainstream media. I've given you a definition of what I think of as the mainstream media, so your attempt to claim that we haven't answered it yet is just another straw man in your massive legion of straw men you keep creating this evening. But I beg you to actually consider the fact that what we are describing is, even if you think not as accurate as you would like, an expression of a problem that is going on in our societies. Functioning liberal democracies need to have trust in their media. And the best that your side has been able to come up with so far tonight is to say, we get things wrong quite often, but you should trust us.
This is fucking goddamn. Oh.
That's self-explanatory.
That's it.
I mean,
that was great. Yeah.
There's something to add on.
But my hopes were like, okay, so after this, maybe we'll be able to bounce back.
From what I remember.
So where do we find trust, Matt? I mean, do we find trust in Substack? I'm generally curious about that. Where, if it's not mainstream media, which we traditionally have turned to, for better or worse, to seek out facts that are widely understood to be true, then where does that truth factory now exist, or does it not exist at all?
It doesn't come from an institution. There's no shortcut to trust in media. The only way to get it is by doing a good job over and over and over again, not getting things wrong, and when you do get things wrong, admitting it. There's no other way to do it in media. And the mainstream media, what we're talking about tonight, has repeatedly gotten things wrong, not admitted it, not owned up to it.
Let's, just in our remaining time here before we go to closing statements, the other part I want to touch on for the benefit of this audience is power and the powerful, and how media either holds these to account or not. And I think, Michelle and Malcolm, people would observe today that there are an awful lot of billionaires that now own large chunks of mainstream media. Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, the Hunt family, the Boston Globe, Rupert Murdoch, the whole swath of properties. Mr. Buffett, I understand, owns 30 newspapers in America. Do you guys acknowledge, or do you fear, are you concerned about the extent to which mainstream media now is a plaything of some very powerful corporate interests that may not have the interests of citizens or their democracy at heart?
I think that that's obviously true. Right? I think that that's inarguable. I would be surprised if there was any difference of opinion between us on that. I don't think that that's something, it's something that is new in terms of the scale of the wealth, because, we live in an age of ever escalating inequality, but it's not a new thing that very rich people have controlled the press. That's been true for as long as there has been a press in this country. I do think, however, that when you asked before about how you restore trust, and again, I know I keep saying this. I apologize if this is not totally relevant to the Canadian context where you have, kind of media organizations funded by the government. In the United States, where you don't have that, except for things like Voice of America and NPR, one of the biggest crises in terms of trust in the mainstream media, I believe, has sort of very little to do with ideology and much more to do with corporate consolidation. There's been an absolute decimation of local media, and that doesn't just kind of impoverish our view of what's going on in the country. It impoverishes the industry because that used to be the way that you came up in journalism. You started working at a local small town paper, you moved to a bigger one, maybe you ended your career at somewhere like New York Times or the Boston Globe or the LA Times. But it gave people, my father is also a journalist. It gave people like my father, who didn't go to an Ivy League school. I mean, I didn't either, but who, sort of wasn't a great student, but was really into sports and was started out as a sports reporter and then became a crime reporter. You had a non-elite path into the mainstream media. It was much more of a blue-collar profession because of the structure of it, because of the way you sort of learned the craft. And it also cultivated trust because you could see for yourself if the world that the newspaper or the local news was describing was the world that you saw. You would see people you knew, things that were happening in their community reflected in the newspaper. And so you would be able to develop a kind of different relationship. You knew journalists, you saw journalists in your community. That has been decimated, but that is not a story of left-wing ideological capture. That is a story of kind of amok capitalism and plutocracy.
So, I mean, I know she's arguing for the other side of,
was the argument that it was a liberal thing?
Yeah, I think what she's been fighting against is that it's been an ideological capture thing. But I think what she fails to understand or realize is that because now, since it's so much more elitist, since the ideology has penetrated into higher learning, that also translates into the people who are coming into the profession. So people who are coming into the profession now are much more elitist and so much more far removed from everybody else, which is why there's this growing mistrust of mainstream media. And so I don't know if she was, I think she was like being real honest there, but she probably doesn't understand how that works to showcase the growing chasm between the mainstream media
she's just
and
trying
everyone
to pull
else.
shit. I mean, it's a losing argument. You can't.
Yeah, I think
you're walking into it. You lost.
I think honestly, I don't think that they understand
who was a better basketball players. I'm defending the 1950s basketball players, and you're going to be defending the modern day players. I have to grasp at anything I possibly can.
Yeah, but it's like I don't think that she's doing this for fun. I think she really thinks this way. I think a lot of mainstream media people and people who
you're
dedicate
in the profession
to
and it's your career.
Right.
So you're going to defend it. You're going to think what you're doing is right.
Right.
And you're going to grasp anything you can to.
Yeah. It's interesting. I never thought about it. It makes sense. I mean, it makes sense, but I don't think that because of
Malcolm
what you just
has
said,
ruined this. So
yeah, like if
anything that she says, I'm gonna be like, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I agree.
I was if it was just her and one of the other guys, Douglas or Matt, like I think it would have been a really good substantive conversation, but because of Malcolm or the version of Malcolm that he brought, it was just like, oh my god,
the version of Malcolm that he brought.
So that's it, man. Yeah, just closing remarks. But that being said, I think it's sensitive. I think that they would be happier but because I didn't think about it, but he's a Canadian journalist, so he works for the powers that be directly. As directly as possible. So, of course, he's taking the stance, and I think that's why he's on this pathway.
He's an ass.
I think that they would be happier if they felt that the composition of prestigious journalistic institutions more closely reflected the full range of ideological attitudes in the American public. That is actually a serious proposition. I don't mean to make light of it at all. But it is one that makes me a little uncomfortable, because I don't think that you can ultimately say that trust in institutions is reserved solely for institutions that perfectly match the characteristics of the general population. More generally, though, when we say of journalists that I don't think we should be judging the quality and trustworthiness of journalists by the composition of that group or by their private ideological positions. I believe that in a liberal society, that we have to believe that the people who compose our professions can place their professional obligations above their personal ideological positions. And if you don't believe we are capable of that act of transformation, then you can't have trust in any of the institutions that make up liberal society.
And we don't.
There you go.
Having different opinions is so 20th century. This century we have different facts, and it's lethal. It's absolutely lethal for the functioning of society. And if you want to see how lethal it is, look at the situation in America, where not just the media, but every institution, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the Supreme Court, every institution, you decide whether it's for your side or not. You quoted one example of what journalism was meant to consist of. I would quote another, what George Orwell said. It's out on his statue outside the BBC. Sadly, the employees do not read it every morning before going in. But George Orwell famously said that the job of a journalist was to tell people facts they don't want to hear. The problem we have in our century coming up is that people will be paying for and absorbing only the facts they want to hear. The argument we are making is one of hygiene, basic hygiene in the media, in the mainstream media. I don't want to blow it up. I don't want an end to it or anything like it. I spent a significant amount of my life in the mainstream media. We just want it to be honest. We just want it to be factual. We don't want it to chase its own prejudices. We just want it to speak truth, whatever that is.
I don't necessarily disagree with Douglas that this kind of constant hygiene is necessary, that journalists need to, I don't even know if objectivity is the right frame, but there does need to be a sort of a constant conversation, institutional constraints, as well as, kind of a certain professional pride in being able to distinguish between what you hope is true and what you actually find. The argument that I want to make is that it is only the mainstream media that sort of has that ethos. If you read conservative media, you will not often find, occasionally you will, but I think in general, you will not often find a lot of stuff that conservatives don't want to hear. I mean, likewise, if you read a blog devoted to the various, kind of failings of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, or whatever, they're not going to suddenly say, oh, I thought they got that story wrong, but when I looked at it again, they really got it right. I know from being in newsrooms, from being around journalists, that there is a hunger out there to find the counterintuitive story, to find the unusual story. Who else has an incentive to do a story about all the complications and the things that we don't know?
She gave a personal example before that last part, but it's actually, like you're saying before, we don't trust any institution. It's like, yeah, instead of looking for an institution, look for specific people who do what Matt has said, like consistently get things right, and then if they do get things wrong, they admit it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she's just so much in the space that she just can't acknowledge her own bias.
Tonight we talked a lot about whether or not you should trust the mainstream media, but for the business, there's a more urgent question, which is, do people trust the mainstream media? And we already have an answer. This is the headline from a recent Gallup Trust in Media survey. Americans' trust in media remains near record low. Washington, D.C. Dateline. At 34%, Americans trust in mass media to report the news, quote, fully, accurately, and fairly, is essentially unchanged from last year and just 2 points higher than the lowest that Gallup has recorded in 2016 during the presidential campaign. Just 7% of Americans have a great deal of trust and confidence in media, and 27% have a fair amount. Meanwhile, 28% of U.S. adults say they do not have much confidence, and 38% have none at all in newspapers, TV, and radio. Notably, this is the first time that the percentage of Americans with no trust at all in media is higher than the percentage with a great deal or a fair amount combined. So, whatever the reason, mainstream media has an enormous trust problem. And it's doing an ostrich act. It's pretending it's not happening. It's pretending that it's somebody else's fault. When you're a writer, when you're a journalist, and people don't trust you, it's always your fault.
Malcolm got a lot out of me. Recently.
He was on Rogan too. Oh my god.
In November. Oh, wait.
Right before COVID-19.
What was it about?
Shit. I don't know. I didn't watch it.
No.
Oh.
They're going to say what is a journalist and a public speaker. He's the host of a popular podcast. And his new book, so he's promoting Talking to Strangers, what we should know about the people we don't know.
Oh, yeah. And like this is, he was on one of those late night shows, and he was talking about this book, and I'm trying to remember. He was talking.
Bill Maher or something?
No. It was a show that I don't really watch.
Doesn't matter.
Jimmy Kimmel, something like that.
If it's not Bill Maher, it really is just. Who cares?
Yeah. But he was talking about Friends and like how Friends was kind of like he has this really interesting way of looking at the world, and it's not in a bad way. Like it's just
Are you talking about the TV show?
Yeah. He was talking about Friends, the TV show, like how everyone's reaction is super exaggerated. People watch that and think, oh, what a great group of people, and go out in real life and no one's like that, so they don't have the same love for someone in real life that they do like that, because they're looking at a piece of fiction and thinking that it's real. So it's like, that's such a cool, interesting way to look at things, and such a nuanced way to look at things. It's just, that's why it's super disappointing to see him in this debate. Like, yo, what the fuck is this guy talking about? But now I think about it, like, yeah, he's a Canadian journalist. That's, you can't get more biased than that when it comes to talking about institutions
or how that could potentially have effects on it.
Yeah. So now that didn't even click till like 5 minutes ago. I was like, oh shit, yeah. But yeah, that's about it. We jump into some other stuff, but try to keep these videos as short as possible. Probably try to clip this down, and yeah. So like us, subscribe, and comment. All right, unintelligent intellectuals out. Malcolm Gladwell's a piece of shit, at least in this debate. Hopefully he finds a way to talk like a normal human being and find his brain again.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about my new book, which, there are many things in it, and I can say all kinds of things about it. But I thought I would talk about an idea that is actually not in the book, but that I've been thinking about a lot since writing it, and which encapsulates a lot of what the book is about. And it's this idea that's called capitalization, and it is a concept that a very brilliant psychologist named James Flynn has written a lot about. Those of you who know something about IQ research will have heard of the Flynn effect. That's James Flynn's idea. And he's written a lot about this concept of capitalization, which is what is the rate at which a society capitalizes on its potential. In other words, what percentage of people who are capable of doing something actually end up doing that thing, right? How efficiently do we make use of the talents within a given group of people? So let me give you an example. I don't know how many of you read Michael Lewis's book, The Blind Side, which is this extraordinary book about a young man in East Memphis, a teenager, who's 6'6" and 350 pounds, and he's discovered by and adopted by a wealthy white family, and they realize that he's an extraordinary athlete, and they work with him until he becomes one of the finest offensive linemen in the country. And in fact, he's about to be drafted into the NFL just many years later and make $1 gajillion. And it's this extraordinary story, but the part of it that always stayed with me when I read it was that right at the very end, the kid, whose name is Michael Oher, says that he's from the slums of Memphis, East Memphis, and he says, if everyone who I grew up with, who was into football, who had real ability in football, actually ended up playing football, they'd need to have 2 national football leagues. And what he was saying was that that East Memphis did not do a very good job of capitalizing on its athletic ability, right? And so Lewis actually follows up on this, and he does this. He talks to some people in the East Memphis school system, and he asks them, what percentage of kids in East Memphis who get a college athletic scholarship actually end up going to college? And the answer was 1 in 6. Which absolutely floored me, because I would have thought that when it comes, if there was one thing in America that we were really good at doing, it would be exploiting the athletic ability of our youth, in particular of our African American youth. I would have thought that in an inner city area, the capitalization rate for sports would have been 90%. But in fact, what we learn in East Memphis is that the capitalization rate is 1 in 6. It's 16%, right? So now think about it. If in something that we care about as much as sports, right? There's possibly nothing in American society that we devote more time and attention, intellectual resources to than the maximization of the professional sporting experience. In something that we care that much about, our cap rate is 16%. So how high must it be in things that we don't care that much about?